Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the United She Stands podcast. Today, we have a very exciting Ohio candidate. And I know we don't really say that a lot, but this year we actually get to say it a lot. And we are very excited about our guest today, Don Leonard. He is running in Ohio's 15th district for the U.S. House of Representatives. And we just love this conversation with him. A little bit more about Don. He spent the last decade as a city and regional planning professor at The Ohio State University and recently stepped away from teaching to run for Congress as a do something Democrat. And we will talk a little bit more about what he means by that. A Medicaid kid turned educator and new dad, Don entered the race after watching working families get squeezed while extremists profit from division and dysfunction. Don is focused on economic freedom, protecting democratic institutions, and flipping one of the most competitive Republican-held seats in the country. Again, that's Ohio's 15th district. He's building a people-powered campaign centered on real results for working people. As I said, y'all will love Don and this conversation. And I honestly learned a lot about policy and kind of different options that we have for some of our broken systems currently. So I think as well as enjoying the conversation, you might even learn a little bit. So please enjoy and check out his campaign website at donforohio.com.
Hi, Don. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Ashley.
Yeah, we're so excited to have you. So we are going to dive right in. We have so many questions we want to ask you and so many topics we want to talk about, but we're going to start here. You grew up with a single mom where you learned both the importance of personal responsibility and social safety nets. And then you spent time in the Peace Corps. And then you later became an educator at Ohio State. So a lot of different experiences in your background. How has this shaped your political philosophy and your priorities as a candidate?
Yeah, I think number one, growing up realizing that heroes are real, and my mother was a true hero. There were times where we'd stop at a restaurant on a road trip and we didn't have enough money to order two plates. So my mom would order the plate, put it in front of me, and then whatever I didn't eat, she'd finish, and that was her meal. So to folks that are out there supporting a family on a single income, it's not intellectual for me. It's visceral. I think anybody who's out there working a full-time job ought to be able to make ends meet and provide for a family. I think that's the biggest thing that taught me. She couldn't be and do everything for me. So public school teachers were so important in helping me work through my own quirks and help me realize my potential, and really pushed me to live into that potential. So I was able to find my way to and through college. There's just no substitute for public school teachers. So yeah, when folks like J.D. Vance write a book like Hillbilly Elegy, where they talk about the importance of personal responsibility, I think there's a lot of missing pages in that book. He forgot to write the page about how his parents and grandparents received public assistance that helped keep him and his siblings fed. He forgot about how all that experience he had in the Marine Corps that prepared him for life was also sort of government programs and government services and the GI Bill that put him through OSU. We have to acknowledge the role that safety nets and government play in helping us fulfill our potential and live out our American dreams. Something I like to share with folks, it's not something I always used to share, was that when I was young, Mom and I found ourselves basically homeless, living out of the back of a pickup truck in Anchorage, Alaska, if you can imagine.
Gosh.
Wow.
It was the recession in '93, and she was between jobs and really struggling. And we ended up, basically needing to go on Medicaid to fix our bones when I fell off my bike. So when she, came back to the trailer park and was just basically like, "We need help. We got to go on welfare." I had begged her not to because I was so possessed by, this sort of hillbilly elegy take on personal responsibility. But what ended up happening was we got a roof over our head. We got I got my own bedroom. And for the first time in my life, for a 14-year-old, I can't tell you what this meant to me. We got MTV. And that was just, it was so great. But I also got my right wrist repaired, thanks to government benefits. And that allowed me to grow up strong and fulfill my potential. And I just think it's so important that we acknowledge how crucial government roles can play in our lives.
Totally. I thank you so much for sharing your story. When I've been to your website a handful of times, to be completely honest, but I love on your website and like Instagram bio, you say Medicaid kid. Like that is, I just think that being so open and proud of it, and just, like as a kid, it felt different, but just being so
Yeah.
open and clear about it, I think is so admirable and so important. I actually just said this on an episode we recorded the other day, but similar, I was so embarrassed to be getting free lunch at school. I didn't even want to go up and get my free lunch.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it's important that we talk about these things. I think that your past has really shaped you to be an incredible candidate that you are today. So, thank you for sharing that. Kind of transferring to the more current state of your life, you became a father in 2025. Congrats.
Yeah.
So this is obviously one of the most life-changing experiences that anyone can go through. Can you just talk us through how it's influenced your perspective on politics?
My daughter is going to live to touch the 22nd century. God willing, she will be 75 years of age in the year 2100. Forget what kind of country and democracy are we leaving her? What kind of planet are we going to leave for the littles that are coming behind us? We recently had to start putting her into daycare. She's about a year old now, and my wife is getting back into the classroom, going off of maternity leave. And I'm obviously out on the campaign trail. So she's been a little extra clingy, which I love. She loves to be picked up. She loves to be held. Well, I was carrying her down the stairs the other day, and I felt her little arms just kind of tense around me because she didn't want to be dropped. And it just reminds me, as a man, as a human, like these creatures are so depending on us to get it right and to do everything we can to protect them. And, whenever I feel tired, whenever I feel like, the Democratic establishment is just fighting me and putting in roadblocks in front of our campaign, I just feel her little arms just tensing around me, and it reminds me that I have a sacred obligation as a dad to, fight as hard as I can, as long as I can, to try to make sure that she has a really great future to live into.
Yeah. As a mom, I can very much relate, and I will say it's a very large motivator every single day, for sure. Okay, let's move on to one more thing that comes off your website. Not to say we creeped on it, but we did. We love it. The top of your website and also your social media accounts emphasize that you are in quotes here, do something Democrat. And I also love that. Yeah, I see your little sign back there. I also love that phrase. So what does that really mean to you? And what would a do something Democrat mean for your time in Congress? Like, what would that look like if you're elected to Congress?
Thank you for that, Ashley. Yeah. We can talk in more detail about where I think the Democratic Party has had some shortcomings in terms of its fight for working families over the last, I would say, 4 decades. But fundamentally, here's what I think it means. It means that I will put working families ahead of my party. It means I will put working families ahead of big donors. And it means that I will put working families ahead of my own, quote, political career in order to get things done, in order to make lives for working families better. It means I'm going to be a wrench in both senses of the word. I'll be a tool to help repair this broken economy and our broken politics. And in order to do that, especially as a freshman congressman, it means I also have to be willing to throw my wrench in the gears and shut things down until such time as we can find an agenda that has the real promise to deliver real impacts for working families. When the voters of Central Ohio hit the ballots in November, I want them to know, regardless of whether they vote for me, that they're going to get somebody going to Washington who is going to fight for them relentlessly. And I think that's what that means to me.
I know you know this. I know Ashley knows this. I know this, but wow, we need so many more do something Democrats out there. So thank you for being one. And I don't know, I also just love Medicaid kid, do something Democrat. I just feel like your campaign like slogans, they're just so easy for folks to understand. And I think that's so important. Ashley and I try to come to folks with this podcast where they are and not try to make politics a big scary thing where you can't even understand what people are saying because of, the vocab that people use. So I think it's just great that you are also meeting folks where they are. I know we talked
Thank
a
you, sir.
bit about, yeah. I know we talked a little bit about healthcare, but we also know it's a big part of your platform.
Sure is.
So, what are specific changes that you would support to make quality insurance and healthcare more affordable and accessible for Ohioans?
Sure. And let me preface by saying why healthcare is such a big, important part of our platform. We know that it is such a large percentage of a family's budget every month. They've got premiums, they've got copays, they've got deductibles. I mean, it almost sounds like a Ponzi scheme when you think of all the different ways that the for-profit healthcare system is trying to take money out of our pockets just to get access to something as fundamental as healthcare. I think that when we talk about the private health insurance system, the for-profit system, I think what we need to do is realize that every single American in this country is overpaying by a factor of about 2. We need to cut out-of-pocket healthcare costs in half for those who rely on private health insurance. And one big way that we can do that is by moving to a model where, regardless of what your insurance is, you have free access to primary preventative health care. You should never have to worry about whether or not you can afford to go get your annual checkup and get some labs done to make sure that your heart is firing on all cylinders, to check your diet, to check the fundamentals that we know allow us to save massive amounts of money and suffering on the part of our fellow citizens. So moving to that sort of model is really important. Another model is to end the war between hospital healthcare providers and health insurance companies over claim denial and acceptance. Right. This is a war that benefits no one, and it leaves the patients and the doctors the most frustrated and the most terrorized. Anybody who has a diagnosed medical condition and has a claim submitted to their insurer on their behalf, that payout should happen automatically. It shouldn't be subject to this bizarre Byzantine system that we have right now. And there are technologies out there. We could set up a national clearinghouse, a sort of a quasi-independent agency that would just automatically, if these are your lab results and this is the prescribed treatment, claim approved automatically, instantly, rather than having hospitals and doctors' offices have to staff up to build the insurance companies and having insurance companies trying to get more revenue for their shareholders by denying those claims. That should not be happening. If you're going to do business in the American health markets, you should have to be doing so in a way that protects patients and their relationship with their doctors.
Yeah. I mean, we know the healthcare system's so broken. So just out of curiosity, all great ideas. Would you be open or willing to support Medicare for all or something like it, a single payer type healthcare system?
Absolutely, Ashley. What we need to do is take existing programs like Medicare or Medicaid that are popular, that are proven, that are incredibly cost effective, and we need to make them available as an option for every American. My own research on this subject tends to point towards Medicaid expansion as the way to provide universal care to all Americans. There's a couple reasons for this. Number one, Medicaid is a program that is funded by the federal government but administered by states. So it allows states to customize how they provide coverage to residents in a way that makes sense for that particular state. Another reason that I think that's a really good idea is now that the Republicans have created this work program, this work test to make sure that folks are qualified, the work verification, great. Anybody in America who has a job also should qualify for Medicaid. Not only would that be great for working families that may or may not have access to a kind of Cadillac plan like folks that work for larger corporations or belong to unions do. It also takes a massive weight off of the backs of small and medium-sized businesses who, again, can't necessarily enroll their employees in some big group plan at a substantial discount, but it means they can at least guarantee that everybody working for them has access to healthcare. And so I think it's a win-win. Other countries provide healthcare to their citizens so that their businesses don't have to stress out about benefit packages. I think America is long overdue to deliver a public option to our residents. I wish Obama would have made that his opening bid during the initial healthcare reform acts he pursued in 2009. But here we are in 2026. It's time to do it now.
Yeah, we totally agree. We just did an episode, it was about actually a book review, but we talked about like the freedom it really gives Americans if they aren't tied to healthcare because of their employer, right? The freedom to get a different job, the freedom to switch jobs, the freedom to open a small business. There's so many
Yes.
things that I think are so American about giving folks the choice and the freedom to move around because healthcare isn't dependent on your employer.
Absolutely. Think about the number of entrepreneurs we could unleash. Think about the
Right.
number of
Yeah.
artists and home healthcare providers who just need some protection for themselves as they care for an aging family member, for example.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, we're going to talk about something else that hits people's pocketbooks really hard, and that is childcare.
Mm.
As a mom who has paid for daycare, I know this personally. My sister right now has her son in daycare, and it is more than their mortgage payment. So let's talk about it a little bit. It's obviously a major concern for many people across America, especially families. What's your proposal for how
Mhm.
Congress should tackle high costs and accessibility for childcare?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And as you guys know, my wife and I are living this right now. We have a 1-year-old child who and is just absolutely the joy of our life. But we also have careers, so it's really important that we have access to affordable childcare, and it's not there right now. I think again, start taking as a starting point the idea that we should take federal programs that are proven, that are successful, and that are immensely popular and expand them. We have something phenomenal in the United States in our Head Start and early Head Start programs that provide children from ages 0 to 5 not only access to safe, quality childhood development environments, but they provide wraparound services for lower income families that may need help in other domains. It's just such a brilliant program. We have 2 volunteers on my campaign who are not only Head Start parents, but they're also members of the policy councils in Head Start. So they understand that while, again, this is a federal program, it is locally administered and it's locally customized by the parents who send their kids to these centers so that they're meeting the needs of local citizens, right? So right now, Head Start allows folks in if they're within 130% of the poverty line. That's kind of ridiculous. That's basically for a family of 4, that's around $43,000 a year. That's so far below the living wage for a family of 4. So what we need to do is expand Head Start eligibility to at least 150% of the poverty line. I would like to see that even higher. But at the same time, we know there's a lot of families that want the flexibility of being able to send their children into the private healthcare, childcare system through either home-based or center-based care. And here we can look to the Zion that is Elizabeth Warren, who did some tremendous work on this topic back during her presidential run back in 2016. And what we learned from Elizabeth Warren is that we already have laws on the books that were passed by Congress back in 1971, but they were vetoed by Richard Nixon, that would have provided a vast network of home and center-based childcare options for citizens so that anybody with up to 200% of the poverty line, which basically encompasses most of the middle class, they would have access to childcare for absolutely nothing. They would have access to childcare for free. Why does that make sense for taxpayers? Because these children are literally our future. They're our economic future. They're the future of our society. They're our future leaders. So it makes so much sense to equip them with the tools they need to succeed in the childcare in the fundamental early phases of development so that when they hit kindergarten, they are ready to run, right? And then that same program provides a sliding scale of reimbursements all the way up the economic ladder until it just doesn't make any more sense to subsidize. These days, that number would probably be around the 250,000, but my staff tells me I'm not supposed to start legislating until January 2027.
We'll get
So
there, yeah. That's
we'll
okay. I
pin that
love
one
it.
down when we
Start
get there.
now. We love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, I just
No.
want to say too, the other side likes to talk about the economy. They love to talk about the economy, which we're going to
Mhm.
talk about in a second. But it's good for the economy too, for like if women can be in the workforce. The more people in the workforce, the better for the economy. So it's just all
Yes.
around a win.
Absolutely, absolutely. And at the same time, I think we do want to create space for folks who do decide that during the early years of their children's development, they want to opt to stay home and raise their children themselves. So I think we need programs for that too. But again, as you guys already underscored, and it really resonates with me, this is about a true freedom agenda. We need to set ourselves free. The economy is supposed to be working for us. We are not supposed to be working for the economy.
Absolutely. Speaking of said economy, um, you have said that America isn't broke, but our economy is. Can you expand on that? Talk about what you mean and how you would address the economic inequality and job insecurity.
Yeah, sure, Sarah. So, not news to you or probably anyone listening to this podcast, but our country is literally the wealthiest society on the planet. I think we all know that. And at the same time, for so many years now, we've been bombarded with the same message, which is America is broke. We've overspent. We're in deficit. We just can't afford. We've got to tighten our belt. We've just got to squeeze a little bit tighter, right, in order to make it through. What has happened since 1981 when Ronald Reagan took office is that the tax rate for billionaires has gone lower and lower and lower and lower. When he took office in 1981, it was at about 78% marginal tax rate for our top earners there. By the time he left office in 1988, the tax rate for our top earners in this country had slid down to something like 27 or 23%. The billionaires owe us back taxes, right? And they owe us for the opportunities that they've had to grow their wealth and to grow their fortunes, right? So what we need to do is move to a system where I think we do a better job with the government revenues we have by fixing a lot of waste and inefficiency at the federal level. And I think the billionaires need to pay back their back taxes in order to pay down our national deficit. One of the reasons I'm optimistic about our ability to deliver more for our taxpayers is because we already pay as much per person for government here in the United States as countries like France or Germany or Sweden. We're already paying for a lot of government here. We just don't have much to show for it. We don't have universal childcare. We don't have universal healthcare. We don't have high-speed rail or affordable higher education or technical training, right? People are still having to take out loans to learn how to acquire trades that are so essential to our economy moving forward. So what we need to do is arrive at a grand bargain where the billionaires agree to pay their back taxes to pay down the deficit, and that we use the immense amount of wealth that we've accumulated as the producers in this economy to reestablish government leadership, to bring down the cost of housing, to bring down the cost of healthcare, to bring down the cost of childcare, and to make this economy work for us finally.
Yes, just like go off on the billionaires, please. I love it. I can't clap because our editor doesn't like that, but like I just want to snap all day as you're talking.
I know you're hyping me up, Don.
I know. Let's go.
I'm hyped up too. Let's do this.
Yes.
Okay, we're gonna pivot to a not so fun topic now. Not that I don't know if people think the economy is fun, but I guess I thought that was a discussion. But let's talk about something else that's very top of mind. So we are recording this episode on January 20th. A lot of folks have a lot of concerns, obviously, surrounding immigration and ICE right now. Immigration was a very big topic in the 2024 election, as we know, and we also know that the system is very, very broken. And no matter kind of where you stand on immigration, I think we all agree that the system for immigration is broken. Can you start just by sharing a little bit on where you stand on the current immigration situation and the current situation in regards to the system, not necessarily regards to the ICE. We'll get to ICE in a second, but just kind of what needs done with our current immigration system and what reforms would you like to see happen?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I think Democrats and Republicans have failed to right this broken system. And that's the only way to describe what we face right now is a terribly broken system where laws have not been enforced and individuals have allowed to suffer under the burden of being second-class citizens here in the United States because they're not protected by the rule of law. And we know that immigration is a top concern for the voters of my district. So, what I want to say, first of all, is that there is no trade-off between being a country that has the rule of law be its governing body, but that also treats the people residing in the United States with humanity and with dignity. Here's a thought experiment for you. What would every business owner and every chamber of commerce in America do tomorrow if we had no undocumented workers in the United States? They would immediately go clamoring to the State Department to start issuing millions of work visas because our economy does not function without the tremendous amount of labor and entrepreneurial spirit that immigrants bring to this country. We're a nation of migrants, and we need to honor that fact by acknowledging their central role in our economy today. I think it's so disappointing that Republicans have used immigration as a distraction tactic to convince voters that the real reason that they're experiencing hard times isn't the billionaires passing themselves tax breaks and loopholes year after year after year. So what I propose is this: that we transition to a system that truly eliminates the existence of undocumented work in the United States by both securing our border and providing documents to those that are residing here lawfully in terms of their conduct, that are paying taxes, that are contributing to our communities. Let's get them that pathway to citizenship. And immediately we will realize that we need to start issuing a lot more work visas across the board at all skill levels so that everyone that comes to this country is protected by our laws. And at the same time, let's acknowledge the fact that this tremendous power and prosperity we have does come with great responsibility. So when refugees coming from other countries to seek asylum are looking for ports in the storm, that countries like the United States are willing to step up and are willing to do our fair share to welcome them and to embrace them and to help them integrate into our society and integrate into our economy. Because we know, up here in Central Ohio, we are so blessed to have a rich diaspora of folks from all different corners of the world. And what are they doing? They're going into neighborhoods that have been underinvested in for decades, and they're bringing the investment. They're putting in the sweat equity. They are absolutely bringing not just delicious cuisine, but just tremendous, tremendous art and spirit and soul into our region. I truly do not understand the world that Donald Trump sees when he looks out the window and says the awful things that he says about our residents. We are so grateful here in Central Ohio to be able to call these folks our neighbors.
We couldn't agree more. And I just want to say how amazing it is, how prideful you are of that community and how open you are to share that. I don't know. It was just kind of made me tear up a little bit. I'm not going to lie. Something that's going to make me tear up in another way. Let's talk about ICE. At the time of this recording, again, Ashley said it's January 20th. ICE is currently terrorizing American cities, and the worst of that being currently in Minneapolis, but we know they're all over the country, including here in our state of Ohio. Where do you stand on what's going on currently with ICE and how they're behaving, and maybe share with our audience where you just came from?
Yeah, thank you for that. Again, we're a nation of laws. We are a nation that requires a border, and we have to defend that border. However, what they have done to a law enforcement agency is convert it effectively into a palace guard that the president can deploy at his whim in order to attack his political opponents. There can be no mistaking the fact that one week Donald Trump starts attacking Ilhan Omar and the people of Somali descent residing in her home state of Minnesota, calling them garbage. And then magically ICE forces decide to deploy to Minnesota and decide that that's the most important, immigration crackdown in America. Surprise, surprise, in the week leading up to Christmas, these ICE forces mysteriously appear in Columbus, Ohio, the nation's second largest Somali population following Minneapolis. This is clearly a tactic by a fearful man trying to attack a political opponent using folks, from her walk of life as essentially hostages. And what they've done both in Minneapolis and here in Columbus is attempt to try to take all of us hostage. So yeah, right before recording this episode, I was standing in the freezing cold. I think the real feel was like 9 degrees, talking to, interviewing, and holding signs with a group of citizens out in London, Ohio, in the middle of a county that some think is irreversibly Trump country. And we were getting not middle fingers, but we were getting honk after honk after honk as passersby signaled their support for us being there in the freezing cold to stand up against something that it's not about Democrat versus Republican. This is about fundamental American values, like not having to carry your papers around with you when you move from A to B. One of the things that, I'm 47 years old. I was born in 1978. Like I remember the Cold War. My formative memories came during the 1980s as Ronald Reagan was waging his war against communism. And the first thing I learned about communist Russia, Soviet Russia, was that it was the kind of place where you couldn't go from A to B without carrying your papers around with you because, some stormtrooper might stop and ask you for your papers. That's not America, you guys. That is not the kind of society that we want to live in. And it's not what we need to do in order to enforce our laws.
Yeah, absolutely. The cruelty in the videos that circle online are horrifying. I mean, first of all, it shouldn't happen to any human. US citizens aren't safe at this point either. They're being pulled out of their homes, they're being detained. I mean, it's insanity. ICE is so out of control.
Yeah,
So let's talk about the future. Let's talk about a bright spot, maybe. We know in 26, even if we take back the House, Donald Trump.
When we take back the House.
When we take back the House, we will take back
Love
the House.
it.
Let's be real. If we take back the Senate, when we take back the Senate, Donald Trump is still going to be president for a couple more years here. So we know there's not much in 26 as a whole we could do. There's probably some stuff, but let's talk about the future, 28, when we flip everything blue. What is your stance at that point? Like, what should ICE as an agency be? Should it exist? Should we abolish it? Should we reform it? Like, what's the overall view or vision for ICE?
ICE is no longer a functioning law enforcement agency. ICE has been completely corrupted and rotted out to its core. It must be dismantled and rebuilt from the ground up. Again, we're a nation of laws, and we will always need people willing to step up and enforce those laws. But when it's crazy when you look at photos of what ICE agents looked like 10 years ago, they look almost like parking meter attendants. They're walking around with, sure, they've got their federal government, ponchos on, but they're visiting work sites. They're confirming people's, paperwork to make sure they filled out the proper paperwork. And yeah, they're conducting what is functionally a civil operation. If you overstay a work visa or any other kind of visa in the U.S., that is not a criminal offense. That is a civil offense. It should be handled like a civil offense. If somebody is a member of a gang or they're participating in a narco trafficking ring or conducting any other kind of crime in the United States, sure, we should prosecute those crimes to the fullest extent of the law. But number one, we have to do it with due process. And number two, only 26% of those in detention right now, these ICE concentration camps, more than 60,000 people across this country in these ICE detention centers, only 26% have any criminal record whatsoever. The vast, vast, vast majority of these folks are peace-abiding people who may have overstayed a visa, but do not pose a threat to American citizens or our residents.
That is absolutely mind-blowing, that percentage. 26%. That is terrible, truly. So we've talked a lot about issues and big issues that you are passionate about, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done. We all know this, but you can't do everything at once. Unfortunately, we wish we could all snap our fingers and make everything better.
Yeah.
That is not reality. So if elected to Congress, and we really hope you are, what would your top 3 legislative priorities be in your first year?
On day one, we need to immediately freeze the cuts to Medicaid that my Republican opponent, Mike Carey, and the rest of the Republicans in Washington shamelessly passed on, of all dates, July 4th of 2025. These cuts threaten not just the financial health of rural hospitals in my district. 47% of the kids in Ohio's 15th congressional district get their health care from Medicaid. We have got to restore that funding on day one. So that would be my first priority. My second priority is to investigate all of those inside and outside government who conducted completely unconstitutional acts that violate the system of checks and balances between executive and legislative power. When a ketamine-addled lunatic in the form of Elon Musk went around with his proverbial chainsaw and started axing executive government agencies. Those agencies do not exist at the whim of the president. Those agencies were mandated by Congress. The U.S. Agency for International Development sends medicine to kids in the global south to prevent them from dying of stuff that we know how to fix. Millions of children's lives are going to be put at risk around the world if we don't get a U.S. Agency for International Development up and running. And that is just one of a dozen agencies. We're talking about cuts to the Department of Education that are threatening the ability of people to finance their college educations or get technical training, right? We're talking about cuts to health and human services that are threatening the ability of people to get access to good science and get their children vaccinated. So again, we can protect them from things that science knows how to fix. We need to restore those functions, but we also need to hold accountable the people who broke our laws and violated our Constitution in the cutting of those agencies. So that's another major priority for me. Big picture, what we need to do immediately is move towards an affordability agenda that puts working families back as a priority of the Democratic Party. I was so disappointed in our own former President Joe Biden that during and after Kamala Harris's failed presidential bid, he continued repeating the lie that the American economy has never been stronger. That is only true if you're looking at Wall Street. When you look at Main Street in London, Ohio, or, other parts of my district up in Piqua, where they've had their maternity ward closed because they just couldn't afford to keep it in operation. When they closed that maternity ward in Piqua, that put folks in Miami County into a position where if you're going into labor and you need to rush to a hospital with a maternity ward, you may have to drive 40 minutes in order to get the access to the kind of professional services you need. That is just appalling. So what we need to do is restore Medicaid funding. We need to hold those accountable who cut these government programs, and we need to get an affordability agenda in place for some of the things we've talked about: healthcare, housing, childcare, so that working families can afford to not just survive, but thrive in this incredibly prosperous economy. And I think that's a point where we need to just sort of take a deep breath and realize, you guys, we're going to be okay. All the wealth and all the technology we need to not just survive, but thrive in an economy where changes in technology like automation pose real potential to actually free up time to spend with our loved ones, to pursue hobbies and community service projects, right? This whole idea that automation has to be some kind of bogeyman that's going to, destroy the American dream. That's only if we let it. That's only if we let the billionaires control that technology and decide who it serves. If we can put this incredible technology to place, we can arrest the climate crisis without having to force folks to, shore up their standard of living. We can afford to spend more time with our loved ones again. We have so much potential and so many resources at our disposal. We just have to take back control of our government and put it to work for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we didn't even get into the AI situation, but we know, on the opposite side of the aisle, they're very against any type of regulation, which, I mean, what could go wrong?
Right.
What could go wrong? So we won't get into that today. We're going to start to wrap, but we have just a few more questions, not as issue focused. Before we get to those, though, I do want to kind of take us to your primary. So you have a true primary in your district. Your district is a seat that Democrats are focused on flipping. It's a very flip. I don't know how to say very flippable, but it's a district we could flip. It's going to be hard work, but we can do it. But before that, you have to win your primary. So can you tell us a little bit about why you folks should go out in the primary in May in Ohio and vote for you over your opponent, Adam Miller?
Thanks so much for that question, Ashley. And first of all, let me just say I have the utmost respect for Adam Miller. He's a former educator. He's a veteran, and he's someone who has served in public office for 3 terms in the State House. The longer I spend on the campaign trail, the more respect I develop for people who are willing to blur the boundary between their personal and professional life and enter the race. So as I draw a contrast between me and Adam Miller, let me just say that I have the utmost respect for him. The reason we entered this race, and I say we, my wife and I took this decision very much as a family, for all the reasons you can imagine, especially with a little one at home. And the reason we decided to enter this race is because we know that we are only 3 seats away from retaking the House of Representatives and preventing Donald Trump and Mike Johnson from not just passing laws, but from diverting funds away from our healthcare programs and sending them off to the Department of Homeland Security so that they can increase the size of their palace guard. When we looked at the Democrat who ran that race last time, and that's Adam Miller, my primary opponent, we saw a good American who lost by over 13 points. Now, it was a rough year in 2024. Democrats across the board didn't do very well, but Sherrod Brown, another good Democrat, lost our district by only 2 points. So we know that Democrats can do better in the 15th congressional district. Now, part of that has to do with the ability to raise money. And I know that with his establishment connections, Adam Miller has definitely succeeded in outraising us. But despite the fact that we are a grassroots campaign, we have already raised over $120,000 from individual donors who are just giving fully much more than they probably should have because they see the same thing we do and they are so concerned. One of the things that I think differentiates us is this focus on the incredible pain that working families are feeling every time they go to a grocery store. They put 6 items in their grocery cart, and somehow it still ends up being like $100 when you hit the checkout line. I mean, it is just so crushingly hard out there to reach the end of the month and realize you not only do you not have anything left in your checking account, but you've had to put stuff on credit card just to try to make the ends meet. So when we talk to voters, we are laser focused on what they're experiencing in the economy, and we are reaching out to independents and conservatives who don't feel as though they're being served by the folks they voted into office back in 2024. And we think our ability to not only reach those voters, but to use new technologies like social media and podcasts and independent media. We think that by getting the message out that there are new Democrats stepping up and we have new ideas and new passion for how we can reinvent this party and reinvent government in order to serve working families, we think that's what voters are going to want to see in November, and we hope that our primary voters see that as well.
Well, I know we're really excited about you, and I imagine anyone listening to this episode is also excited about you, but just in case they're not, what is one thing that you want our listeners to walk away with from this conversation, either about you as a candidate or your campaign or what you'll do in Congress, etc.?
Yeah, thank you for that, Sarah. I am not a career politician. I am not a lobbyist. I'm not a lawyer. I'm an educator. I've been teaching at Ohio State for the last 10 years, right? What I am is somebody who deeply understands what it's like to try to run a family in today's economy. And what I am is somebody who understands how hard it is to crawl out from, humble beginnings and live their American dream. And what I hope they see is that regardless of whether or not, folks vote for me, I will always work relentlessly to not just support the people who send me to Washington, D.C., but to listen to them. I think we need to do so much better of a job as a country at listening to one another. I think the algorithm really wants us to start a civil war. They're elevating the most incendiary posts and putting them at the top of our news feed. They're filling us with anger and despair. But when you actually get out and talk to folks, you realize we have so much more in common and we share so many of the same values. So what I would hope for is that folks take a look at our message, take a look at us at donforohio.com, and really ask us the tough questions that concern them, because I suspect you'll find that we see eye to eye on more than independents and Republicans may imagine.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for leaving us with that. You just mentioned it. I was going to ask you where folks can go if they want to get involved or learn more. So it's donforohio.com. We will have that in the show notes. Don, thank you for joining us. We so appreciate it, and we're so excited for your campaign.
Thank you so much, guys. It was so much fun to talk to you, and I appreciate everything that you're doing. This is the way forward.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Don. We appreciate it.